Thank you all for being here this morning. Thanks to Mike for those beautiful songs and for Logan's words over the Lord's Supper and Eddie's prayer. We certainly are blessed to have brothers who are willing to participate and lead in service, and we certainly thank you so much for that. Today's sermon is going to be based upon our board for the month, which was "The Battle Belongs to the Lord." That was our theme that we looked at this particular month. And sometimes we feel this way right here, don't we? We feel overwhelmed at times. Every one of us, no doubt, has felt that at some point in our lives. Sometimes it even goes to this extreme, where you, one block too many. Okay? one box too many that I just can't quite handle that. We all have gone through that, haven't we? Maybe not to that extreme, but no doubt we have taken on more than we should have. Our lives certainly are that way. We all do. Thankfully, Jesus has given us a way of escape. We all are overloaded. I want you to look at a verse with me here this morning in Matthew chapter 11, a verse that you're very familiar with. But the key words to this entire verse are the very first words: "Come to me." Jesus said, "Those that are willing to come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke, Jesus' burden, upon you, because I'm gentle and lowly, and you'll find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." That's the whole key to this entire verse that Jesus speaks of here, is that his burden is easy if we're willing to come to him. That's the whole point in a nutshell. This morning, we want to talk about this. The battle belongs to the Lord. How many of us are taking on a burden today? We're taking on responsibilities or overwhelmed that we're not sharing that with God. We're not allowing God to help us with our battles. We're not allowing God to help us. Throughout time, God's people have been burdened, oppressed, taken advantage of, overwhelmed, undermanned, understaffed, undersupplied in many cases. Yet when they allowed God to help them, they won. Their struggles were over. God is that key component to our battles, and allowing him to help us with our struggles. He is the key, and allowing him to help us with our burdens. How many of us bring God along when we're burdened with something? How many of us bring God along in our lives when we're going through a difficult time? How many of us allow God to take on our battles? If you're anything like me, I don't. Oftentimes I don't. And what happens when I do that? I lose. I fall flat on my face and eventually pick myself back up. And then I remember, oh, yeah, I forgot. God's willing to help me with this. The battle belongs to God, not to me. And oftentimes we forget. 2 Chronicles chapter 20, one of the verses that Loretta and Sarah had put on the board for this month was this one. 2 Chronicles chapter 20 and verse 15. He said, "Listen, all of Judea and your inhabitants of Jerusalem, and you, King Jehoshaphat, thus saith the Lord to you, do not be afraid or dismayed because of this great multitude, whatever the battle might have been, for the battle is not yours, but it's God's." God is willing to help us with our battles. And yet many times we forget. Psalm 18 and verse 39 says, "For you are armed with me with strength for the battle." God gives us the strength to overcome our burdens. "You have subdued under me those who rise and rose against me," David said. "The horse Solomon says in Proverbs 21 and 31, is prepared for the day of battle. We can arm ourselves with military force with horses, but deliverance is of God. Ultimately, God is the one who will win our victories for us. Also, we noticed on our board was one of the verses was 1 Samuel chapter 17 and verse 47. You're familiar, no doubt, with that chapter. Then all this assembly will know that the Lord does not save with sword or spear, but the battle is the Lord's, David said, and he will give you into my hand, speaking of Goliath. I want to spend some time this morning with that very familiar story, but I want us to consider that in the light of our context of what our board is saying this month is the battle belongs to the Lord. Look at this wonderful story. Even the wee little children know this story. From the smallest to the great, we all know this story. But this is such a powerful message. And it goes so well with exactly what this title and this theme is for the month. The battle belongs to the Lord. What was David facing in that battle against Goliath? He was facing an overwhelming monster. These ceilings in here are about 10 foot tall, I think. And that's just about as big as what Goliath was. He could probably get up there and change the bulb in that projector on the ceiling without a ladder. That's a big dude. That is what David was facing. And David probably wasn't much bigger than Christian, perhaps, in that age bracket somewhere. You think Christian could handle a monster like that? He probably could. He'd give him a run for his money, but not a warrior, a monster warrior. David was facing Goliath. Look what the Bible says here in 1 Samuel chapter 17. If you'd like to follow along, we're going to primarily stay in chapter 17 here for the bulk of the lesson this morning, or I'm going to post them here as I normally do. But start in verse 3 with me. The Philistines stood on one side of the mountain, and Israel stood on the other side, and there was a big valley between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Now, the translation of that is somewhere around 9 foot tall. 9'9", some say 8, whatever. Big dude. And he's not just big, but he's also a skilled warrior. He knows what he's doing in battle. He's not just big and clumsy. He's big, powerful, and knows how to kill. This guy means business. That's what David's facing. He had a bronze helmet on his head and was armed with a coat of mail. Now, what is that? That is a jacket that he would wear that was woven with steel rings to give him reinforcement, but yet mobility to be able to move and to chop and slice and do whatever he wanted to do, but yet it protected him with this coat. And the coat weighed 122 pounds, or 5,000 shekels, which translates to somewhere around 122 pounds. That's weight. That's a lot of weight. That's as much as some of you weigh. And he's wearing that as a coat. This is a big, strong dude. And he had bronze armor on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear, the wooden part, was like a weaver's beam. We don't know what that means exactly, but if you are in the business of needing a needle thread and making rugs and things, it's that big long bar that goes across the top of a spinner's web that they spin. What do they call it? Yeah, whatever they call it, right? Anyways, it's a big heavy piece of wood is what it boils down to. It is approximately 10 or 12 feet tall, long, and that's a stick. That's a spear. someone has recreated what it might have looked like. Look how big. That's just what he carried as his spear. It's as big, it's hard. This guy can hardly hang on to it. You can see he's struggling with it. Verse 7, the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the iron spearhead, the sharp part, was 600 shekels and had a shield bearer that went before him. The spearhead itself, that big metal piece, was about 15 pounds, just that part. We're talking about an unbelievable monster that David is facing. Verse 8, then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said, why have you come up for battle? Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servant of Saul? Choose a man from yourself and let him come down. Now he's taunting them. Here I am. Let's have a fight. Who's going to take me on? Which one of you pipsqueaks are going to try to take me on? Carries on. Verse 9. But if he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we'll be his servant. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you're going to be my servant. You're going to be our servant. There's the deal. Which one wants to take me on? Verse 10, the Philistine said, Goliath says, I defy the armies of Israel, that's God's people, this day. Give me a man that I may fight, that we may fight together. I'm just looking for a good old-fashioned fight. Who's tough enough to take me on? When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and were greatly afraid, and so would I be. I wouldn't want no part of this dude. Would you? This guy is huge. The Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. 80 times he stands up before him and says, here I am. Who's going to take me on? You want a piece of me? You want a piece of me? Must be a bunch of chickens. And he'd stand there and gloat twice a day for 40 days. He means business. But he's just taunting them, isn't he? Which one of you can handle me? My stick is twice as big as you, much less me. And here I am, a man of war. Who's going to take me on? Skipping on down to verse 22. David, a shepherd, left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper and ran to the army and came and greeted his brothers. They were out there trying to fight this dude. Then he talked with them. They talked to him and said, there's a champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming down from the armies of the Philistines. And he spoke according to the same words. And so David heard them. David said to Saul, let no man's heart fall because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. So don't worry about it. Dad, I got this handled. I'm gonna take this guy on. What? Saul said to David, wait a minute. You are not able to go against this Philistine and fight with him, for you're just a youth, you're just a boy. And he's a man of war from his youth. You can't take him on. Was David's dad Saul, was Saul right? Yep, he was. David alone couldn't take this guy on. There is no way. Let's carry on. Verse 34, look what David said. Your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And then when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and I struck it and I killed it. So wait a minute. David's starting to reflect on some of his victories here. I was able to handle a bear and a lion. Why can't I take on this big dude? I can handle him. Your servant has killed both lions and bears. And this uncircumcised Philistine, he'll be just like one of them, seeing he has defiled the armies of the living God. He is just taunting God's people. And I'll take on this dude. I'll take him on. I can handle this guy. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Give it a try. Go ahead. But who's going to be with David through this? The Lord. David is smart enough to know that by himself, he has no chance. But who does he take along with him for this battle? The Lord. He's smart enough to know that this battle belongs to the Lord, not to me. So look at verse 38. So Saul clothed David with his armor, and he put a bronze helmet on his head, and he clothed him with his own little suit woven with golden steel rings to try to give him some kind of protection, and fastened his sword to his armor, and he tried to walk, but he had not tested. He hadn't tried this before. And so David said to Saul, I can't walk with these things, for I've not tried them. I've not tested them. So David took it off. Get this thing off of me. I can't even move in this thing. It's just too big and bulky and clumsy. It's not going to do me any good. So then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook. And he put them in a shepherd's bag in a pouch, which he had, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. So the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you might come to me with sticks? What are you doing with a sling? I eat that sling for breakfast. That's nothing to me. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods, the Philistine's gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. I'll tear you into pieces and feed you to the birds. Could he have done that? You betcha. Had David tried to take on this battle by himself, would Goliath had eaten him, taken him apart piece by piece like that? He probably would have. But David was smart enough to know that the battle belongs to the Lord. David knew he was up against an overwhelming odds. There's no way this little boy is going to conquer this monster. But yet, David is smart enough to know that the battle belongs to God. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you defile. This day, the Lord will deliver you into my hands. What must have been Goliath been thinking? Ha, 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 right. You little twerp. Who do you think you are coming against me? Who do you think you are? You don't stand a chance. David continues then, he says, then all assembled shall know that the Lord does not save with a sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. You're dead meat, Goliath. You don't stand a chance, because God is going to take you down, brother. So it was, verse 48, when the Philistines arose and came and drew near, and they met David, and David ran down toward the army to meet the Philistines. Then David put his hand in his bag and took the stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead, so that the stone sank into his head, in his forehead, and boom, fell to the ground. What a thud that might have been. That must have been a thud heard around the world, right? What an impressive battle David takes on here. You know, that's true. It don't matter how big, tough you are. You get hit in the head, you're going down. Leanne knows about all these pressure points and bad spots on the body. And these guys that fight, you know, they know their pressure points. That's one of them. Your head, no matter how big and tough you think you are, you get hit there, brother, you're going down. What was the battle? What battle are you facing today? You may be facing a Goliath in your life right now. What is your battle? What battle are you facing that belongs to God, that you're trying to take on your own, take on yourself, and yet you know that you need God's help in it? But what happens? Every single time, pride gets in the way. Anytime I'm faced with a problem in life, who do I turn to? I turn to myself. I got this. I can handle this. I'm okay. And what happens? Every single time I lose. When I don't take God along with me and allow God to battle these battles with me, I lose every single time. What's your Goliath today? Within the sound of my voice, this group of people here before me have something going on in your life. I know you do. I do too. What's your battle? What's your Goliath today? Maybe you've got some health issues. I'll tell you what, that'll mess you up. When you allow health issues to take over your life, and they begin to snowball, and one thing leads into another, you go to the doctor for this, and he says, oh, well, now you got this, and then this, and it begins to get worse and worse and worse. That becomes a mountain to climb, doesn't it? It becomes a Goliath. I'm standing here looking up at this monster, this mountain. How am I going to get over this? How am I going to overcome this? Alone, I'm not. But we must remember God is with us. Maybe you suffer from depression. I tell you, we don't talk enough about depression, anxiety, depression, mental issues like that. We don't talk enough about them. But folks, that's a Goliath. It is huge in your life. If you've ever been through that, I have, you feel like there's no escape. There's just no way I can handle this. It's too much. I went through that. I was taking little pills for it, and they didn't help. What I had to come to realize was I need God. I needed God in my life to help me overcome the issues I was having. Now, some people need medication. I get that. But sometimes if you're anything like me, it just boiled down to I was overwhelmed. I was taking on more than I could handle, and I was not bringing God along for the ride. God wasn't driving my car. I thought I had it under control, and guess what? I wrecked it. I fell into the ditch. When you don't take God along for the ride and let him drive the car, you're going to have trouble. You're facing a Goliath in your life that you cannot fix. You cannot beat this without God. Too often we try. We medicate ourselves. We self-medicate ourselves with drugs and alcohol and pornography and all sorts of promiscuous things to try to self-medicate ourselves through this to get me past another day. And the whole time, God sent there saying, this is my battle. I'll help you. You have to come to me. How about a marriage? Maybe your marriage is on the rocks today. You're fighting with your spouse constantly. There's no common ground there. There's no love anymore. You've lost that. What a gut punch that is. When you're faced with that, and I've been there, that is a Goliath in your life that you can't conquer. You can't beat it on your own. You will beat your head on the ground and beat your head on the ground and beat your head on the ground until it's just bloody. Until and unless we're willing to turn to God, he will overcome these things for you and with you. Come to me, Jesus said, all you who are labor and heavy laden, I will give you rest. I got this. I can handle this. I'm a smart dude. I got this. I got this under control. I don't need God. I can figure this out on my own. Is that true? No. I might be smart, but I need God. I need God to help me with my issues of life. You ever had too much month at the end of the money? Yeah, me too. About the 15th of the month and we don't have no more money. Yeah, but you got a whole stack of bills left. What are you going to do? You think that's not a mountain to overcome? Been there? You see what I'm saying? We have Goliaths in our life that we have to face each and every day. And if you're trying to do it alone, it's just like David going against the monster Goliath. Did he have a chance? He didn't have a snowball's chance against Goliath. But for God, he had a chance. Because David is smart enough to bring God along in his life and recognize that the battle belongs to God, not to me. He had enough sense about him to know, there's my hope. There's my chance to overcome and to conquer this monster in my life. Maybe that's whatever. You may add other things. I don't know what your Goliath is today, but I know you've got one. Are you willing to let God help you? Are you willing to bring God along and let God help you with your battles? The battle belongs to God. If you're willing to let him help you, he's there and willing to help you. Jeremiah 29 and verse 12 says, then will you call upon me and pray to me, and I will listen to you. No, nobody's going to help me with this. I got this. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your soul in a drought and strengthen your bones. You shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters don't fail. It's just constant. The waters just continue to come and come and come and come. That's how God says that his blessings will be to you when you ask for him. When you put God in your life. Isaiah 48 and verse 17, thus saith the Lord, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. I am the Lord, your God, who teaches you to profit, who leads you by the way you should go. He's there for you. He's waiting for you. But are you that stubborn that you're not willing to take God along in your life? Are you that stubborn and prideful that you're not willing to let God help you fight these battles? Say it isn't so. God is our refuge and strength, a present in time of help. Acts chapter 17 and verse 27 says, so they should seek the Lord and hope that they might grope for him or search for him, though he be not far from each one of us. He's right there. He's there for us. All we have to do is submit to him and allow him to live in our lives. For in him we live and move and have our being. As also some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. He's there for you. Are you willing to take it? What's your Goliath today? Are you willing to surrender yourself to God as we sing this song, I surrender all, and let God help you through our battles in your life? Or are you still going to hold on to that foolish pride and say, oh, no, I don't need God. I don't need God of all people. You don't know who you're talking to. You see how prideful we get sometimes? And God is simply saying, all right, go ahead. If you're that prideful, we'll see how this works out for you. We'll talk about that later. You see, we all have Goliaths in our lives. Are we willing to take God along and help us with the battle? If you're here this morning and need to respond to the gospel's call this morning and accept God's help in our lives, he's offered us forgiveness of our sins if we're willing to repent of our sins, confess him before men, and be baptized for the remission of those sins. But sometimes we still have that same pride. Don't need that either. I can figure this out on my own. I don't need God. Yes, you do. And the sooner we figure that out, the sooner we'll be like David, who was able to conquer those Goliaths in his life. If you're here this morning and you need to respond to the gospel's call, I hope you will. right now, as you have the opportunity and as we stand and sing.